Part 1. The execution ground. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty execution ground on planet Kepler 7. Commander Nari knelt in the center of a large circle with her hands tied behind her back. The metal restraints cut into her wrists, but she did not move or make any sound. Around her, thousands of her people knelt in similar chains. Men, women, and children all waiting for their fate. The Valkyrian executioner stood tall behind Nari. His purple skin gleamed in the sunlight, and his forearms moved with practiced ease as he prepared his plasma blade. The weapon hummed with deadly energy, making a sound like angry insects. Nari could feel the heat from the blade. Even though it was still several feet away from her neck, Tribune Vexkar stepped forward to read the charges. His voice boomed across the silent crowd through electronic amplifiers. Nari, the human commander, had refused to surrender her colony ship to the Valkyrian Empire. She had denied them access to her people and their resources. For this crime of defiance, she would die first. Her people would follow. Nari closed her eyes and thought of her daughter, Somin, who was still aboard the colony ship somewhere in orbit above them. The girl was only 12 years old and had already seen too much violence in her short life. Nari hoped the child would somehow survive whatever came next. She hoped Somin would remember her mother as someone who stood up for what was right. Even when it meant certain death, the executioner raised his plasma blade high above his head. The crowd of prisoners watched in terrified silence. Some of the children were crying softly. Their parents tried to comfort them, even though they were all facing the same fate. The Valkyrians had made it clear that no mercy would be shown to anyone who resisted their rule. Nari opened her eyes one last time and looked across the faces of her people. These were scientists and engineers and farmers and teachers. They had left Earth decades ago to build a better life among the stars. Now they were about to die on this alien world far from home. But they had followed her willingly, even knowing the risks. They trusted her judgment even now. The plasma blade began its descent toward Nari's neck. She felt the heat growing stronger and prepared herself for the burning pain that would end her life. The executioner moved with slow ceremony, wanting to make the moment last for the watching crowd. Death was meant to be a lesson for anyone who might think about resisting Valkyrian rule. Then something impossible happened. A strange whistling sound cut through the air, followed by a wet thud. The executioner screamed and stumbled backward. Nari opened her eyes to see a primitive arrow sticking out of his shoulder. The plasma blade clattered to the ground as he grabbed at the wooden shaft protruding from his purple flesh. "Heads up," came a calm voice speaking in broken Korean from somewhere behind Nari. The accent was strange, but the words were clear enough. Someone had just saved her life with what appeared to be a weapon from ancient Earth history. Chaos erupted across the execution ground. Valkyrian guards shouted orders and raised their energy weapons, but they could not see where the attack had come from. The rocky hills surrounding the area provided perfect cover for hidden attackers. More arrows flew through the air with deadly accuracy. Each one found its target among the Valkyrian forces. The guards began firing their plasma rifles wildly into the hills, but they were shooting at ghosts. Whoever was attacking them knew exactly where to hide and when to strike. Nari watched in amazement as figures in strange armor began emerging from the rocky terrain. They moved with purpose and deadly grace, firing what appeared to be ancient projectile weapons. But these were not ordinary arrows and bullets. They struck with impossible accuracy, and each shot seemed to find the weak points in Valkyrian armor. The lead figure approached Nari's position while his team created a protective circle around the kneeling prisoners. He was clearly human with dark hair and intense brown eyes. His armor was primitive-looking compared to Valkyrian technology, but it seemed to work perfectly against their energy weapons. "Commander Nari?" he asked in heavily accented Korean. His pronunciation was rough but understandable. "I'm Captain Han Sol of the Terran Marine Corps. We are here to get you and your people out of here." Nari could barely believe what she was hearing. Earth had been cut off from the outer colonies for over 50 years. Most people assumed the homeworld had been destroyed or conquered by one of the alien empires. But here was proof that humanity still existed and still fought. "How did you find U.S. Nari asked as Hansal quickly cut her bonds with a combat knife. The blade was simple steel, but it sliced through the alien restraints like they were paper. We have been tracking Valkyrian expansion for months, Hansal replied while ducking as a plasma bolt sizzled overhead. Your distress beacon reached us 3 days ago. We came as fast as we could. Around them, Hansal's Marines were methodically freeing the other prisoners while maintaining accurate covering fire. Their weapons looked like museum pieces compared to the advanced technology of the Valkyrians. But somehow they were winning the fight through superior tactics and impossible marksmanship. Sergeant Eugen appeared at Hansal's side carrying what looked like an ancient rifle. Captain, she reported, we have secured the immediate area, but Valkyrian reinforcements are inbound. We need to move now. Nari looked around at her people who were slowly getting to their feet. They were terrified and confused, but they were alive. The children had stopped crying and were staring at the human soldiers with wonder. These strange warriors had appeared from nowhere to save them when all hope seemed lost. Copy that. Hansal responded to his sergeant, then turned back to Nari. Commander, we need to get your people to the extraction point. Can they move? Nari looked at her colonists and saw the same determination that had brought them to the stars in the first place. They were scientists and engineers and families with children. They were not soldiers like these humans. But they were survivors. They will follow me anywhere, Nari said with conviction. Just tell us where to go. The sound of approaching Valkyrian aircraft filled the air. The enemy was bringing heavier weapons to bear on their position, but the humans did not seem worried. They had obviously planned for this possibility. Hansal smiled grimly, and Nari realized she was seeing something the galaxy had not witnessed. In generations, humans at war, not just fighting for survival, but fighting to win completely. The Valkyrians had made the mistake of threatening innocent people in front of soldiers who had spent their entire species history learning how to solve problems with violence. This way, Commander Hansal said, pointing toward a narrow canyon that led away from the execution ground. Stay close to my people and keep your heads down. We are going to show these aliens why humans are considered the galaxy's problem solvers. As they began to move, Nari realized that this rescue was about more than just saving her people. It was the beginning of something much larger. The age of Valkyrian dominance was about to face its greatest challenge. Humanity had returned to the stars, and they were not happy about what they found. Captain Hansal moved with deadly efficiency as he cut through the restraints of the nearest prisoners. His combat knife sliced through alien metal like it was soft clay. Around him, his Marine team worked in perfect coordination, creating a protective barrier while freeing as many colonists as possible. The Valkyrian guards were in complete chaos. Their energy weapons seemed strangely ineffective against the primitive-looking armor worn by the human soldiers. Plasma bolts that should have melted through any known material simply bounced off or dissipated harmlessly against the human battle. Gear. How is this possible? Nari asked as she watched a young Marine named Private So Young take down 3 Valkyrian warriors with nothing but an ancient-looking rifle. The weapon fired simple metal bullets, but each shot found its mark with impossible precision. Hansal smiled grimly while helping an elderly colonist to his feet. We have been fighting wars for 10,000 years, Commander. These aliens have been the dominant power for so long they have forgotten how to face someone who does not follow their rules. The truth was more complex than Hansal let on. Human armor was not just primitive looking, it was deliberately designed to appear outdated. Beneath the rough exterior lay advanced materials that could absorb and redirect energy attacks. The weapons were equally deceptive. What appeared to be simple firearms were actually precision instruments, capable of accuracy that defied physics. Sergeant Eugen appeared at Hansal's side with a tactical report. Captain, we have freed roughly half the prisoners, but more Valkyrian units are approaching from the east. Air support will be here in approximately 12 minutes. Hansal nodded and turned to Nari. Commander, we need to move your people now. The extraction point is 2 kilometers through rough terrain. Can your colonists handle that kind of movement? Nari looked at her people and saw fear mixed with determination. These were families who had traveled across the galaxy to build new lives. They were not soldiers, but they were survivors. Many of them had endured hardships that would have broken lesser spirits. They will do whatever it takes to survive, Nari replied with conviction. Just tell us where to go and we will follow. The sound of approaching aircraft grew louder. The distinctive whine of Valkyrian hover tanks echoed across the rocky landscape. The enemy was bringing heavy weapons to bear on their position. But the humans seemed ready for this escalation. Corporal Minho, the team's demolitions expert, had been busy during the rescue operation. He had placed explosive charges throughout the execution ground while his teammates freed the prisoners. Now, he prepared to spring his trap on the approaching reinforcements. All teams, this is Hansal. The captain spoke into his communication device. Execute Phase 2 on my mark. Remember, we are not just saving these people, we are sending a message to every Valkyrian commander in this sector. The first wave of enemy reinforcements arrived with overwhelming force. Hover tanks descended from the sky while armored ground vehicles approached from multiple directions. The Valkyrians clearly intended to crush any resistance with superior numbers and firepower. Mark, Hansal said quietly. The execution ground erupted in a series of controlled explosions. Minho had calculated the charges perfectly. The blasts created craters and barriers that channeled the enemy vehicles into predetermined kill zones. Hover tanks that had seemed invincible moments before now tumbled from the sky like broken toys, but the humans were not finished. As the Valkyrian forces regrouped, Yujin and her sniper team began picking off enemy commanders from hidden positions. Each shot was carefully aimed to cause maximum confusion in the alien ranks. Without clear leadership, the Valkyrian units began making tactical errors. Move, Hansal shouted to the colonists. Stay low and follow my people. We are going to show these aliens what happens when they threaten innocent families. Nari helped organize her people into a moving column. Children stayed close to their parents while adults carried supplies and aided those who needed assistance. The colonists moved with purpose despite their fear. They knew this might be their only chance at freedom. The human marines formed a protective corridor around the moving civilians. They moved like ghosts through the rocky terrain, appearing and disappearing behind cover while maintaining constant pressure on their pursuers. Their tactics were unlike anything the Valkyrians had ever encountered. Where did you learn to fight like this? Nari asked Hansal as they navigated through a narrow pass between two large boulders. Earth Commander Hansal replied simply. We spent most of our history fighting each other. We got very good at it. But we also learned something important about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Behind them, the sound of battle continued as more Valkyrian forces arrived. But somehow the humans seemed to be winning, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. They used the terrain to their advantage and struck where the enemy least expected it. A young girl named Diyun tugged at Nari's sleeve. Commander, she asked, are these humans really here to save us? It seems too good to be true. Nari looked at the child and saw her own daughter Somin. Both girls had been forced to grow up too quickly in a galaxy full of violence and oppression. But perhaps these humans represented something different. Perhaps they offered hope for a better future. Yes, Nari replied gently. These humans risked their lives to save people they have never met. That tells us something important about who they are. The column reached a wider area where the Marines could establish better defensive positions. Hansal called for a brief rest while his team assessed the tactical situation. The Valkyrians were still pursuing, but their attacks had become less coordinated as casualties mounted among their leadership. Commander Hansal said to Nari, this is just the beginning. Once we get you to safety, we need to discuss something important. The galaxy needs leaders who are willing to stand up to impossible odds. Nari understood what he meant. This rescue was about more than just saving her people. It was about building a resistance movement that could challenge Valkyrian dominance across the galaxy. The humans had shown that superior technology could be defeated by superior tactics and unbreakable will. As they prepared to move again, Nari realized that her life had just changed forever. She was no longer just a colony commander trying to protect her people. She was about to become part of something much larger. The age of human problem-solving had begun. The extraction route led through a series of narrow canyons that wound between towering rock formations. Captain Hansal had chosen this path carefully, knowing that the confined space would limit the Valkyrians' ability to use their superior numbers and heavy weapons effectively. The human Marines moved through the terrain like they had been born to it. Private So Young took point position scouting ahead for enemy ambush while Sergeant Yujin covered the rear with her sniper rifle. The colonists stayed in the middle of the formation, protected by walls of living armor. Commander Nari found herself walking beside Corporal Minho, who carried enough explosives to level a small city. The young Marine had a cheerful disposition that seemed completely at odds with his deadly profession. He entertained the children with stories about Earth while simultaneously planning the destruction of anyone who threatened them. "Tell me about your world," Minho Nari asked as they navigated around a fallen boulder. "What is Earth like now?" Minho's expression grew more serious. "Earth is healing, Commander. After the Great Wars, we learned to work together instead of fighting each other. But we also learned that sometimes you have to fight to protect what matters most." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching aircraft. Valkyrian scout ships were searching the canyon system, trying to locate the fleeing prisoners. The aliens had learned from their earlier mistakes and were now using more cautious tactics. "Contact above," Hansal called out. "Everyone find cover now." The colonists pressed themselves against the canyon walls while the Marines raised their weapons skyward. The Valkyrian ships appeared overhead, moving slowly and scanning the ground below with powerful sensors. But the humans had prepared for this possibility. Yujin had positioned herself on a high ledge with a clear view of the canyon entrance. Her rifle was not designed for anti-aircraft work, but she had modified it with special ammunition that could penetrate even advanced alien armor. She waited patiently for the perfect shot. The lead Valkyrian ship descended lower, trying to get a better look at the shadows below. The pilot was confident in his vehicle's defenses against primitive human weapons. That confidence would be his last mistake. Yujin fired once. The bullet struck the ship's main sensor array, causing it to spiral out of control. The vessel crashed into the canyon wall in a ball of fire and twisted metal. The other ships immediately pulled back to a safer altitude. "Outstanding shot," Yujin Hansal called out. "Keep them honest." The column resumed its movement through the canyon system. But the Valkyrians were adapting to human tactics faster than expected. Ground forces began entering the canyon from multiple directions while air units provided overwatch. "From above. We have a problem, Captain," called out Private So Young from her forward position. "Enemy infantry blocking the main route. At least 30 hostiles in defensive positions." Hansal quickly assessed the situation. The Valkyrians had learned to use the terrain to their advantage just as the humans were doing. But they had made one crucial error. They were fighting like Valkyrians instead of adapting to human methods. Minho Hansal said quietly. "What do you have that can clear a path without bringing down the whole canyon on our heads?" The demolitions expert smiled broadly. "I have just the thing, Captain. Give me 5 minutes and watch what happens when you underestimate human creativity." Minho disappeared into the shadows, carrying a pack full of carefully prepared charges. The man moved like a ghost through the rocky terrain, avoiding Valkyrian sensors through a combination of skill and pure audacity. He had learned his trade in the worst combat zones Earth had to offer. The colonists waited anxiously while the Marine worked his magic. Children clung to their parents while adults tried to project calm they did not feel. Everyone understood that their lives depended on the skills of these strange human soldiers. Nari found herself studying the Marines more carefully. They were not superhuman or technologically superior to their enemies, but they possessed something the Valkyrians lacked. They fought with passion and purpose that went beyond simple military training. Captain Nari said to Hansal, "Your people are remarkable. Where did you learn to fight with such intensity?" Hansal was quiet for a moment before answering. "Commander, humanity spent centuries learning that freedom is not free. We paid for it with blood and sacrifice. Now we share that lesson with anyone who needs it. The canyon erupted in a series of precisely timed explosions. Minho had placed his charges to create a rock slide that would trap the Valkyrian forces without blocking the escape route. The enemy infantry found themselves buried under tons of falling stone. Path is clear. Captain called out Minho from his position ahead. But we need to move fast. More hostiles approaching from the east. The column moved through the cleared area with renewed urgency. The colonists understood that time was running out. Valkyrian reinforcements were converging on their position from multiple directions. Soon the humans would be too outnumbered to continue their fighting retreat, but Hansal and his team showed no signs of panic. They had planned for this scenario and had contingencies in place. The extraction point was still several kilometers away, but they had bought enough time to reach it safely. As they moved through the canyon, Nari began to understand something important about these humans. They did not fight to win quickly, they fought to win completely. Every action was calculated to achieve maximum effect with minimum risk to the innocent people under their protection. The sound of pursuit grew louder behind them, but somehow Nari felt more hopeful than she had in months. These humans had appeared from nowhere to save her people. Perhaps they represented the beginning of something that could challenge Valkyrian dominance across the galaxy. The age of human problem-solving had indeed begun, and the Valkyrians were about to learn why that was such a terrifying prospect for anyone who threatened innocent lives. The canyon widened into a broader valley where the Valkyrians could bring their heavier weapons to bear. Captain Hansal immediately recognized the tactical disadvantage and began issuing orders to his team. They would need to adapt their strategy to survive the coming assault. Sergeant Yujin took position on a high ridge overlooking the valley floor. Her sniper rifle was equipped with advanced optics that could track targets at extreme range. She had learned to shoot on the training grounds of Earth, where missing your target meant letting down your fellow soldiers. The Valkyrian forces approached with overwhelming firepower. Hover tanks descended from the sky while armored personnel carriers deployed infantry squads across the valley. Their commander was confident that superior numbers and technology would crush any resistance, but the humans had spent their entire species' history learning how to defeat enemies who seemed invincible. They understood that every advantage could be turned into a weakness if you knew how to think creatively about the problem. Minho had prepared a series of explosive surprises throughout the valley. The charges were hidden in locations that would seem random to the enemy but formed a carefully planned network of destruction. Each explosion would channel the Valkyrian forces into predetermined kill zones. Commander Nari watched in amazement as the human Marines coordinated their defense with nothing but hand signals and whispered commands. They moved like parts of a single organism, each knowing exactly what the others needed without being told. Your people, Nari said to Hansal, they fight differently than anyone I have ever seen. How do you coordinate so perfectly without advanced communication systems? Hansal smiled grimly while checking his rifle. Commander, we have been fighting together for 3 years. Before that, we served in different units, but we all learned the same lessons. Trust your teammates, protect the innocent, and never give up no matter how bad things look. The first wave of Valkyrian attacks began with a barrage of energy, weapons fire. Plasma bolts turned the air into a deadly light show while explosive rounds shattered rock formations throughout the valley. But the humans had chosen their positions well, and most of the enemy fire struck empty ground. Yujin began her methodical work from the ridge. Her first shot took out a hover tank commander, causing his vehicle to crash into a rock formation. The second shot disabled an infantry squad leader, leaving his troops without clear orders. Each bullet was aimed to cause maximum confusion in the enemy ranks. Contact left flank, called out Private So Young from her position near the valley entrance. Multiple hostiles moving to flank our position. Hansal responded immediately. Minho, prepare charges to seal the left approach. Yujin, shift fire to support So Young. We are not letting them split our formation. The battle developed into a deadly game of chess with both sides trying to outmaneuver the other, but the humans had a crucial advantage. They were fighting to protect innocent people while the Valkyrians were fighting to maintain their dominance. That difference in motivation made all the difference in the world. Corporal Minho triggered his first series of charges, creating a rock slide that blocked the left flank approach. The explosion was precisely calculated to trap the enemy forces, without endangering the colonists. The Valkyrians found themselves facing a wall of fallen stone, but the enemy adapted quickly. Aerial units began providing close air support while ground forces regrouped for a coordinated assault. The Valkyrians had learned from their earlier mistakes and were now using more sophisticated tactics. "We have a problem," Captain called out Yujin from her sniper position. "Enemy aircraft are bracketing our position. They are trying to force us into the open." Hansal assessed the situation quickly. The Valkyrians were using their technological advantages more effectively now, but they still did not understand the human way of war. They fought to win quickly while humans fought to win completely. "All units, this is." Hansal, the captain, spoke into his communication device. "Execute contingency plan Delta. Show them why humans are banned from most military academies in the galaxy. The contingency plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to fight the Valkyrian aircraft directly, the humans would use the enemy's own tactics against them. Minho had prepared charges that would bring down portions of the valley walls, creating a temporary shelter while simultaneously blocking the enemy's escape routes. The demolitions expert triggered his charges with perfect timing. The resulting explosions sent massive boulders tumbling into the paths of the hovering vehicles. Several aircraft were destroyed outright while others were forced to retreat to safer positions, but the most impressive part of the plan was how it demonstrated human creativity under pressure. Instead of simply destroying their enemies, the humans had created a tactical situation that favored their own strengths, while negating the enemy's advantages. Nari watched the battle unfold with growing admiration for these strange warriors. They did not fight like any species she had ever encountered. They seemed to thrive on chaos and impossibility, turning desperate situations into opportunities for victory. The Valkyrian commander was becoming increasingly frustrated with his inability to crush the human resistance. His forces had superior numbers and technology, but somehow they were being outmaneuvered by a handful of primitively equipped soldiers. As the battle continued, Nari began to understand something profound about human nature. These Marines were not just following orders or fighting for pay. They were fighting for something they believed in. That belief made them stronger than any weapon or piece of armor. The tide of battle was turning in favor of the humans. But the real victory was not measured in enemy casualties or tactical advantages. It was measured in the growing hope Nari saw in the faces of her people. For the first time in months, they believed they might actually survive this ordeal. As the battle in the valley continued, Commander Nari began to understand that this rescue was about much more than saving her people. The humans were not just fighting the Valkyrians, they were making a statement to the entire galaxy about what happened when you threatened innocent lives. Captain Hansal moved through the defensive positions, checking on his Marines and ensuring the colonists remained safe. His calm demeanor under fire was remarkable considering the overwhelming odds they faced. But Nari was beginning to realize that impossible odds were exactly where humans performed their best. The Valkyrian forces had been reduced to roughly half their original strength, but they were still dangerous. Their commander had finally accepted that this would not be a quick victory and was preparing for a prolonged engagement. But that decision would prove to be another tactical error. Captain Nari said during a brief lull in the fighting, "Why did you really come for us? Your people could have stayed hidden, avoided this conflict entirely. Earth could have remained safe from Valkyrian attention." Hansal was quiet for a moment before responding. His answer would reveal something important about human nature that the galaxy had never fully understood. Commander Hansal said humanity spent most of its history fighting itself. We got very good at it. But we also learned something important during all those centuries of war. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies even when the odds are impossible. The fighting resumed with renewed intensity as the Valkyrians launched another coordinated assault. But this time the humans were ready with a surprise that would demonstrate why their species was considered so dangerous by anyone who understood military history. Sergeant Eugen had been saving her most advanced ammunition for this moment. The bullets were designed to penetrate even the heaviest Valkyrian armor, and each one was guided by microsensors that could adjust trajectory in flight. Her rifle became a weapon of impossible precision. The sniper began systematically destroying enemy equipment with shots that defied physics. Hover tank engines exploded from single bullet impacts while communication arrays were disabled by rounds that seemed to curve around obstacles. The Valkyrians had never faced anything like this level of marksmanship. Minho contributed his own brand of chaos by triggering charges that created a maze of obstacles throughout the valley. The explosions were timed to channel enemy forces into predetermined kill zones while providing cover for the human defenders. It was demolition work elevated to an art form. Private So Young demonstrated why human infantry was feared throughout the galaxy. She moved through the battlefield like a ghost appearing behind enemy lines to eliminate key targets before vanishing into the rocky terrain. Her tactics were unlike anything in standard military doctrine, but the most remarkable thing about the human performance was how they protected the colonists throughout the entire engagement. Not a single civilian was injured despite the chaos surrounding them. The Marines had created a bubble of safety in the middle of a war zone. As the extraction point came into view, Nari realized that this rescue had changed her understanding of what was possible in the galaxy. The Valkyrians had seemed invincible for so long that most species had simply accepted their dominance. But the humans had proven that even the most powerful empire could be challenged. The extraction point was a clearing where 3 human dropships waited. The vessels were utilitarian and lacked the sleek design of more advanced civilizations, but they radiated an aura of reliability and purpose that spoke to their builders' practical nature. Besides, Hansal continued his earlier explanation. We heard about what you did. Refusing to surrender your colony ship, protecting your people even when it meant certain death. That kind of courage is something humans respect and admire. Nari felt a surge of pride at his words. She had made the only decision her conscience would allow, but it had seemed futile at the time. Now she understood that her gesture of defiance had inspired these warriors to risk their lives for complete strangers. As her people boarded the dropships, Nari noticed something remarkable about the human Marines. They were not celebrating their victory or showing relief at completing their mission. Instead, they were already planning their next move, discussing how to hit the Valkyrians where it would hurt most. This is not over, is it? Nari asked Hansal. As they watched the colonists file into the safety of the transport vessels. Commander Hansal replied, this is just the beginning. The Valkyrians rule through fear and superior technology. But they have never faced an enemy that turns their advantages into weaknesses. They are about to learn why humans are considered the galaxy's problem solvers. The dropships lifted off carrying the rescued colonists toward safety. But Nari understood that safety was relative in a galaxy dominated by the Valkyrian Empire. The real solution would require something much more ambitious than a single rescue mission. Looking back at the battlefield, Nari saw evidence of human tactical genius scattered throughout the valley. The Valkyrians would study this engagement for months, trying to understand how they had been defeated by such primitive weapons and tactics. But they would never truly comprehend the human way of war. The age of Valkyrian dominance was ending. Whether they realized it or not, the humans had returned to the galaxy and they were not impressed with what they found. The time for hiding and hoping for mercy had passed. The time for human problem-solving had begun. The dropship interior was cramped but comfortable as Commander Nari found herself sitting across from Captain Hansal. Around them, her people were being treated by human medics with the same efficiency and care that had characterized their entire rescue operation. The medical team worked with supplies that appeared primitive compared to advanced alien technology. But their results were remarkable. Injuries that would have required sophisticated equipment to treat were being handled with simple tools and skilled hands. Nari watched as a young medic named Private Janae treated a child who had been wounded during the initial capture. The girl was frightened and crying, but the medic's gentle manner soon had her smiling. It was clear that these humans cared deeply about protecting innocent lives. "What happens now?" Nari asked Hansal as the dropship climbed toward orbit. "Now we disappear," Hansal said simply. "The Valkyrians will report this as a terrorist attack by unknown assailants. They cannot admit that a handful of humans with primitive weapons defeated their elite forces. It would damage their reputation for invincibility." Nari understood the implications immediately. The Valkyrian Empire maintained control through fear as much as military might. If word spread that they could be defeated by inferior technology, their entire system of dominance would begin to crumble. "And my people?" Nari asked with concern for their long-term safety. "Safe," Hansal assured her. "We have colonies that can take them in. Places where the Valkyrians will never find them. But, Commander, we are hoping you will consider something else entirely." Nari raised an eyebrow. "What kind of something else?" "The galaxy has been under Valkyrian rule for 2 centuries," Hansal explained. "They have crushed every rebellion, conquered every independent system, but they have never faced humans before. We are offering you a chance to be part of something bigger." Through the dropship's small porthole, Nari could see her colony ship in the distance. It was surrounded by Valkyrian vessels and would soon be stripped of everything valuable. The sight should have filled her with despair, but instead she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. "What would you need from us?" Nari asked, already knowing she would agree to whatever Hansal proposed. "Your knowledge of Valkyrian systems," Hansal replied. "Your connections with other oppressed species, and most importantly, your courage. The galaxy needs leaders who are willing to stand up to impossible odds." Nari thought about her daughter So-Min, who was somewhere aboard the colony ship. The girl would grow up in a galaxy where the Valkyrians no longer seemed invincible. That alone made any sacrifice worthwhile. The dropship docked with a larger human vessel that appeared to be part transport and part warship. The design was purely functional, without any of the aesthetic touches that other species favored. But it looked like it could survive anything the galaxy threw at it. As the colonists were escorted to their new temporary homes, Nari was taken to meet the ship's captain. Commander Liebin was a weathered veteran who had spent decades fighting in the Outer Rim territories. Her story was typical of the human military experience. "Commander," Nari Liebin said with a firm handshake, "welcome to the Resistance. We have been waiting for someone like you for a long time." The ship's briefing room contained detailed maps of Valkyrian territory and intelligence reports on enemy movements. But what impressed Nari most was the evidence of coordination between human forces across multiple star systems. This was not just a random rescue mission. "We have been planning this for years," Liebin explained. "Building networks, infiltrating enemy territories, preparing for the day when we could challenge Valkyrian dominance openly. Your rescue was just the beginning of something much larger." Nari studied the maps and began to understand the scope of what the humans were proposing. They were not just planning to save individual colonies or win tactical victories. They were planning to liberate the entire galaxy from Valkyrian rule. "When do we start?" Nari asked with growing excitement. Commander Liebin smiled, the same expression that had terrified Valkyrian forces across the galaxy. "We already have." Across the briefing room, displays showed real-time reports from human forces throughout Valkyrian space. Supply convoys were being attacked. Communication networks were being disrupted. Key installations were being sabotaged. The resistance was already underway. But the most important victory was not measured in destroyed ships or captured territory. It was measured in the growing hope Nari saw spreading among the rescued colonists. For the first time in generations, ordinary people believed they could fight back against their oppressors. The age of Valkyrian dominance was ending. The humans had shown that superior technology and overwhelming numbers could be defeated by superior tactics and unbreakable will. More importantly, they had proven that standing up to bullies was not just possible but necessary. Outside the ship's viewports, the stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere among them was Earth, where humanity had learned the hard lessons of war and peace. Now they were sharing those lessons with anyone who needed them. Nari thought about her daughter So-min and the future she wanted to build for her. The old way of hiding and hoping for mercy had failed. It was time to try the human way of solving problems. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed.